This is OK&Y podcast episode number 10, right?
Yeah.
Is it 10? Okay, cool.
Probably.
Yeah. I'm Ichin. I am the Y of OK&Y podcast. Kenny.
Hi, I'm Kenny. I'm the K of OK&Y podcast. Funnily enough, I'm not the O. But the
Mhm.
O is over there. It's
Me. Drop the
Yeah.
ball. It's Oliver. Yeah. That's all.
Well, everybody knows you because you're the one who's mostly playing the games.
Yep.
right. It's the O podcast featuring K and Y occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So topics of discussion today. We don't really have too much of a structure today. We just wanted to talk about FAB 2.0. And this is from, I guess it's from a judge's perspective, a player's perspective, and somebody from mostly the outside perspective, commenting on what they think about 2.0. Spoilers, it's mostly positive, but we have a few asterisks to go with that.
Hard
So
word
let's
to
go.
say.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. So I guess we'll just go down the list where FAB 2.0 was announced with the article. Just go one by one from there.
I was going to say FAB 2.0, I must say, is definitely a bit of a clickbaity title.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I'm glad they clarify it. But
for the most part, it's like it's. I guess you can call it FAB. It's. I guess it's kind of clickbaity, but to me at least, it's a new product structure, and it's a new way to structure the products. So I figure the 2.0 is warranted in this point because it's just a new direction that they're heading in, right? Or maybe it's not a new direction; it's realigning themselves to their old direction.
Arguably, we'll get to that.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's just go ahead and go through that. So the article opens off with James White going blah blah blah, bring people together into flesh and blood, blah blah blah. You know, the usual spiel. And the first thing he notes after he goes through how the article is going to be structured is that they are going to be retiring first edition and focusing more on, quote, the playing of flesh and blood. So, Kenny, do you have some comments about that? I know you're the
I
one who was
absolutely-
franchised with it, so.
Yeah, I absolutely have some comments about that. First off, I just want to say that it's a good thing, right? So I think overall the shift away from first edition and even keeping what they're talking about with the way they're going to distribute cold foils and everything, which I'm not sure if it comes up in this particular part, but it comes up a little bit later on. I think that's a good thing, a good way to preserve that cool cold foil chase rare aspirational point of the game, or the collectability, while still making it so that people can access the cards. And that's actually been something I've harped on about for ages. So, funnily enough, on Christmas Day, I just pulled up an article that I wrote then. I wrote about why I was starting to get disengaged with the game. And a lot of that was because some quotes I wrote down were, I'm here to make money. I'm not opening anything. I'm seeing crazy prices for some cards from Crew, but what are they actually? 4 people called my local game store today looking for Crew boxes. I told them that we were out, but we were actually having a sealed tournament if they were interested. And the person on the phone hung up. And so a key thing with all of those situations, which I think has been what I called an elephant in the room for quite some time, was just it was really the game wasn't about the game. It was about the collectors. Most of the people in the game were collecting and trying to invest and make money. I'm glad to see a shift more towards the players.
Yeah, I definitely feel that too. I wonder how much of it was intentional for them to be focusing primarily on collectors, because 2020 was the year where all these collectible card games started taking off. So I wonder if it was either intentional on James White's part to be focused more on the collectible hoarder aspect of it, or rather they predicted that collectors would behave a certain way, and instead of opening product to search for chase cards, they decided to hoard a product themselves, which I think is the main problem, right? It's the fact that the collectors, quote unquote, were the ones who were hoarding product and not opening it and preventing other people who wanted to play the game from actually playing the game.
I think there's a big misnomer, right? And there in the sense that it's about collectors. I'm not saying that you've got it wrong in that it's not really about collectors per se, because I think collectors are a myth. Really, there aren't people who just collect the game, right? There are people who invest in highly desirable cards to try and either hold them for value later on, or sell them for profit. That, to me, in my head, is not what a collector is. A collector is someone who tries to collect the game. They try and acquire, yes, potentially high rarity cards or whatever it may be, but the purpose of that is for collection, not for investment. But I think what we saw in Flesh and Blood and in a lot of other trading card games as well was investment rather than collecting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess I should define that. Yeah, it's definitely the investors, not the collectors, that are contributing to this problem. And part of that is admittedly like on James White's part because he's the one who cultivated that audience, which is like it's a deal with the devil where you have to like deal with Rudy and to deal with Rudy's audience primarily, who are looking to make a quick buck and looking to kind of use this as their retirement fund rather than actually engaging with the game and playing with it. That being said, even though it does help put a lot of eyeballs in it, James White also mentioned, I think, in an interview with Team Covenant, that the player growth that post crew happened with Rudy and CFB signing on with the game was way too explosive and caused a lot of missteps further down the line, which obviously led to the whole Monarch debacle with CFB. I say that even though I'm going to be judging for them. Hopefully, they don't take it too personally.
I mean, we're just commentating on things, right? It's not.
Yeah.
It's nothing personal. It's just more a thing that's happened. Yeah, it's definitely the explosion of popularity contributed to a lot of different problems, right? And I can't fault them for any of that. But I don't think anyone, at least not me, when I was playing Flesh and Blood at the start, expected it to balloon just as much as it did. And so I can understand them being, short of stock and everything at that point. And I even commented, like, just to reference the article. If anyone wants to look it up, the article is called Elephant in the Room on Tome of Oz. It's 2 years old. No need to go look at it. But basically, the main point I got to at the end of it was actually that most of what Legend Story Studios had done was actually good. And they had just almost been the victim of their own success. It was just kind of the steps that they could take from there, which could kind of address one of the main problems. Because really, at the time, and what ended up becoming a major problem was the fact that both investors, quote unquote, and players were drawing from the same pool of cards. In that, in the beginning, there was only first edition. So people were trying to get Masks of Momentum and Fire Spring Tunics, and they had no choice but to get either the cold foils or the gold foil ones, which were the same cards that the collectors were seeking. And that was what was causing the prices to dramatically escalate. But now that, Unlimited is out, and there's a little bit more availability, prices aren't ballooning anywhere near as much.
Yeah, it's almost gotten to the point where, or actually, it's long past the point where prices for boxes right now are at a I want to say LGS sustainable level, right? Because you have Card Shop Live that is, or AKA CFB, that is selling boxes for essentially like 66% of market value. And you have other stores that are just trying to get rid of as many boxes as they can because they have too much and because the distributors force them to take Unlimited, which doesn't really sell, in order to buy first edition. So it's a big, it's a big clusterfuck. Sorry to say, but it's just an unfortunate situation all around. And I hope people take this as not a sign that the market is dying for the game, but that the market's cooling off and it's going to something that's honestly more similar to Magic, where you have cheap boxes available for a lot of Magic boxes that are way under MSRP that players can pick up and people can open. And that will contribute to people actually playing the game. How many people will actually pick them up? That remains a question. But that being said, like even recent sets like Crimson Vow and other like Magic sets are usually on sale for $90, which for an MSRP of 144, that's about 66%. So that's kind of how I see the FAB market right now. Obviously, this is from somebody who's completely a layman and doesn't understand the market. So take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you also as a layman who doesn't understand all of the market behind it, but understands at some level. It's just the kind of thing where I don't think the demand and the amount of product that we were seeing, people seeking earlier on was just not sustainable. And as long as the game continued to basically be a game, the only reason demand was so high at that time was because people saw the potential to make a huge amount of money. People weren't actually demanding the game for playing sake. They were demanding it because they wanted to be able to cash in and make money. Yeah. So the demand that we're seeing leveling off is just because now the investor demand doesn't really exist anymore. Right? Like that just doesn't happen. But now what you're seeing now is just player demand. So it's not that players have stopped seeking cards. They're still seeking cards. It's that you now don't have this extra market of people who are just buying massive amounts of boxes just to try and make money. It was insane how many boxes people were buying, right? There were, people ordering like 10 cases and that kind of thing beforehand just to kind of sit on and try and move on later on.
Yeah, people were just buying up pretty much like pallets and stuff of like box of
Yeah.
cases. Yeah, and that's I think the main problem with all that is that when you have that sort of demand, right? I guess I'm kind of repeating myself. And LSS does admit this later on in the article, where when you have that much first edition, only a certain small amount of first edition available and a larger amount of unlimited, that's fine. But there's no demand for unlimited because you overprinted to compensate for those people who are buying up the game. Then that's a big
Mhm.
problem, especially with Everfest and Tales of Aria, where you can get first edition pretty much no problem right now, and nobody wants unlimited because it's just there's no chase cards to find in because everything that's played is also found in unlimited or also found in
Mhm.
first edition, and it's more valuable there.
Yeah, exactly. So why would you purchase unlimited at all, right? That's exactly it. Because first edition is just more valuable, and yeah, that sustainable demand isn't there for unlimited.
Yeah, and part of that was the distributor's fault. I'm not sure if it was like that over in Australia that you were seeing, especially with Crew and Monarch, where stores couldn't get product because distributors were holding them back because they thought they could make money off of it. Was that the case
That
for you?
No, that didn't quite happen in Australia. I do actually know the distributor for Flesh and Blood in Australia because members of my family work with them, and I can guarantee that that was not happening in Australia. In fact, there was actually so much demand that part of the reason why distribution sometimes was slow in Australia, to my understanding, but it was actually just because demand for it was so high. So places were getting short stocked effectively, but it wasn't because the distributor was holding stock on their own.
I see. Yeah. I know for certain distributors like Team Covenant, they initially said that they were shipping out as much as they had, right? And then I'm not sure if either they were given extra cases later after the initial demand had passed, or if they held on to it. But I know it pissed a lot of people off where CFB and Team Covenant and some other big retailers uh, quote unquote found additional pallets of product to distribute at a later date.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure. I'm not going to accuse anybody of like shadiness and everything, but that definitely contributed to the perception and contributed to the problem of not having enough product and distributors being sneaky so that stores could not get enough product in.
Mhm.
Uh,
Absolutely. Do you have any thoughts on all of this, Oliver?
I just play the game. I'm not in it for the money.
Well,
you say
that's
that.
that's how it should be, right?
You say that, but last time I checked, you're the one who's constantly like, "Hey, where's my cold foil auras? Hey, where's my cold foil this?
Yeah, I
Where's
like
my?"
bling. Those are promos though. So those are army
Okay,
promos.
yeah,
It's
trying to
different.
get a
Yeah.
monopoly of those, huh?
Not
I guess
really.
the key, Oliver, is that you want them for bling, right? You want the cold foil so you can slap it down on the table and look like a boss, right? You don't want it so you can then flip it for thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to
He
play
doesn't
with
want the
them.
money. He doesn't want money. He wants the perception that he has a lot of money.
That's true.
Okay, so going down the article, they have a short blurb that says, "Why not release first edition and limited on the same day?" And for the most part, they say that they could have just done that instead of making this new product and changing up the product. But they don't want a quote unquote collector booster box.
Hmm?
I guess that's a slight dig at Magic's product structure, where you have three different types of boosters available at the same day
Mhm.
for different price points of players. But it's interesting that they want to go just one product. I guess it's easier to manage, right? It's one product. All the stuff is in there, and everybody who wants it can pick it up, and it's for everybody that is involved with the game. Technically, it's just them saying we want people to get the same dopamine rush as they do right now, where you open a cold foil and it's really nice and you have a bunch of money.
Mhm.
I guess that's a cynical interpretation, but I guess it's
Yeah,
more of a commitment to the product, right?
I think the decision is good, right? I think that the decision to basically just form one product rather than having first edition and unlimited, and as I was mentioning before, having it so that the cold foils and rainbow foils appear in the same set, but just at different distribution rate or drop rates, for lack of a better term, is totally great. So I'm glad that they're shifting towards this. But I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about the tone wanting all of these people to be able to get that seems like good PR stuff. And I know that in the past there seems to have been the case where they have talked about the fact that the secondary market is kind of the lifeblood of the game, and that the fact that all of these investors were existing was actually a good thing. That's my perception of the situation anyway. For me, it doesn't seem super genuine, but that's just
So
me. That's me being cynical.
so I'll push back on this a little bit because it sounds like that you're saying that the secondary market should be ignored if you have a good game, right? If the secondary market is just superfluous stuff that is a necessary evil to the game rather than it's something that should be a lifeblood of the game, right?
So, not necessarily. I think the secondary market is important, right? But I guess what I'm saying is that what they're doing now, right, with the creation of the combination of cold foils and that in the same set, is that the wild secondary market that we've seen, right, the one with cold foils basically having a limited lifespan and there only being a certain number in circulation, will no longer really happen, right? As long as the set is being printed, old foils are still going to be being printed, right? There's no lack of first edition or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, as such, like the kind of wild side of the secondary market that we've seen, I expect will disappear and it will kind of calm down a little. And then on top of that, so the secondary market that is left, the one with some cold foils that come up sometimes and rainbow foils and just general trading and stuff, that's great. But I think that is an important part of the game. I don't think the wild side that we've been seeing is important. Basically, just I think it was pretty acknowledged by a lot of people in the player base, at least, that investing was a big problem as far as the player base was concerned, right? It was making cards inaccessible. It was not the lifeblood of the game. It probably turned quite a few people away. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the biggest thing when it comes to onboarding new players, and Oliver
Yeah.
can actually attest to this one, is that they ask, well, the game seems really expensive. I don't really want to invest in it.
Yeah. So trying to like just recruit some new people, just because of like commenter and everything, for our weekly events. Yeah, they keep asking like, or they keep saying, "Oh, we've heard of this game, but we've looked at the prices and they're like super, super high." And I'm just like, you just ignore that. Those are for like the more competitive side of the game. If you can still build really good decks without buying any of the legendaries or any of the really expensive cards they need to build around.
It's hard to shake off that perception
Yeah.
because a lot of people's first exposure to the game, even from a non-engaged standpoint, is from the hype that surrounded Las Vegas Calling, and it's also from the hype that surrounded Monarch. And those were when prices were at the craziest,
Mhm.
especially in around Las Vegas Calling, when all the Magic personalities were talking about the game. And people were going, okay, cool. Well, I'll check it out. And they look up prices and they see, oh, this card sold for $800, and it's just a card from a new set. There's no cheaper version. Well, okay, I'm just gonna check out then. No, no, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I talked about it again in the article that I wrote, where I was saying, imagine like at that time when Crucible, I think this was the time just before Monarch when I had written the article because it was the end of 2020 and Monarch came out in early 2021. But that was a time where the hype was pretty astronomical as well, and people were looking at the product. And could you imagine at that time where I think when I wrote the article, cards were only at like the $300 to $400 mark, so they hadn't even hit their highest at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Give it a month later, and all of a sudden you've got a lot of the cold foils start to hit like $900 to $1,000 or
Hmm.
something like that. Especially the hyper competitive ones, right? Like Mask of Momentum and
Yeah.
Scab Skin, etc.
Even Courage of Blade Hole was like $600 or something at some point. Crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy, right? And so, can you imagine being a player? Like, if I was starting a game and I went, cool, I want to be a competitive player in this game. This game's pretty great. I really like playing Ninja. Well, I'm going to go look up a good Ninja deck and I'm going to see what cards I need. Mask of Momentum is one of them. Great. How much is that? 1,200 US dollars. Cool. Don't want to play this game anymore. Like,
Yeah.
that'd be pretty much the end of it. I guess my whole point there is that secondary market, I think, is bad for the game.
Mhm.
I don't think that there was. I think this just could have come earlier. Is my point. I'm glad it's happening now, as far as changing, the distribution structure and everything. But it could have come earlier, and I think it would have saved. It would have saved a lot of players,
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how far in the pipeline they are planning stuff. It does seem like that if they were to make any changes, Everfest, they might have squeezed in the last minute change, but Uprising is probably the earliest time they could have made changes. Just because it's like, okay, sets are designed. I think I mentioned this before in an earlier episode of the podcast. Sets are designed usually 6 months before, or finish designing 6 months before they go to print. And then before then, you have to actually decide on the product structure. You have to decide on like how the draft structure works and all that. So around the time that Monarch released, that was like what, May of last year. So I guess they could have changed up Everfest if they wanted to, if they really wanted to. But yeah, definitely around Tales of Aria, they were probably just like, okay, this is unsustainable. We have to make this change. That being said, they are modifying this to be one product. They're changing the cold foil slot to be in the token slot, which is nice for people who are opening packs because it gives you the chance of having a nice like triple majestic or whatever, triple legendary pack, whatever. And it helps prevent that. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, Kenny, but the Tarmogoyf moment in one of the Magic GPs, where
I know what Tarmogoyf is.
okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with this exact scenario. So what's happening is that it's the top 8 draft of a GP, and the player is passed a pack where he has to decide between Burst Lightning, a junk common, or Tarmogoyf. It's a foil Tarmogoyf,
Yep.
and the thing is that if you lose the draft, you get less money than the foil Tarmogoyf is worth.
Yeah, so he picks the foil Tarmogoyf, right? He may as well rare draft.
Yeah. So this became a big controversy in Magic, and what ended up happening is that the foil Tarmogoyf gained so much notoriety that he sold it, and he made like something like 10K or something crazy off of it, which ultimately ended up being more than the prize money he would have got if he would have gotten first. So pretty nice, right? I guess this is to prevent that moment where it doesn't look that great to the game, where you're forcing your pro players to money draft to get value.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
Yeah. So I like this change. I think it's pretty nice for all players because they get to open the stuff that they pick up.
I actually had a little like side story about that. Actually, it is about Magic. It's not about Flesh and Blood, but that exact scenario happened to me in a top 8 for a PTQ. So at the time, I opened up. This was what's it called? Zendikar.
Okay.
Right, so quite some time ago now. But I opened up a foil Marsh Flats, and I opened up a Heartstabber Mosquito. Now, foil Marsh Flats at the time was going for like $80, and I was in high school, and so that was quite a lot of money. I was like, oh, maybe I take the Marsh Flats. But Heartstabber Mosquito was like a B to A tier card in draft.
It's a good card. It's like what, a 2/2 with a kicker, destroy a creature.
Yeah, 2/2 with kicker that becomes so it's a 4-cost 2/2 flyer, which is already okay. And then its kicker, it becomes a removal spell, which is pretty awesome. And I ended up picking the Heartstabber. And I know that my friend on the day was like super angry and really frustrated because we shared collections. And he's like, why didn't you just pick the $80 card? You're not going to win anyway. And he stormed off. And then I won the PTQ. And that's how I got to San Diego. And I won because of Heartstabber Mosquito. Nice. It was just this one particular game where I remember like going, oh man, I really need both a removal spell and a creature this turn. And I don't know if I have one. And I drew the Heartstabber and I'm like, this is like, you couldn't write this moment, right? Just perfect. Anyway, so I understand rare drafting very well.
Yeah. And I guess it's just to prevent that moment where you have to waffle between stuff. Now, if you open a legendary rainbow foil, you're still going to probably take that because that's probably still going to be like what, at least like $30-$40 at most. So you're probably still going to take that, but it makes the super high money drafting less feel bad. Speaking of which, I actually wanted to point this out to people who don't know. The legendary cold foil and rainbow foil packs are not, the rarities for them are not mutually exclusive. So I just did some quick math for them. The legendary cold foil is 1 per 220, and legendary rainbow foil is 1 per 80. So if my math is correct, which it probably isn't, but I believe that works out to be like something like 1 in like every 62 packs or something is a legendary, which is a lot better. I won't say it's great, but it's a lot better for availability of the legendaries. And obviously, people who are searching for the cold foil version of legendary will naturally open a bunch of legendary rainbow foils that they'll just want to sell. So overall, I like the change. I would like to see higher legendary rainbow foil drop rates, but I can't complain too much because they're inching towards better ideal rates.
Yeah, I want to clarify that, like, despite my seeming rants and stuff, the changes that they're doing are good.
Mhm.
All of the changes they're doing for the game, in my eyes, are very good in this article.
Yeah.
I've just
Uh,
a lot of stuff boiling for 2 years.
so one thing I actually wanted to mention is the introduction of a new secret rarity, which was the purple triangle or the half diamond. It's a Marvel rarity, so another M rarity, which is kind of annoying. But there are high tier alt art versions of cards. I don't mind this existing, but I wish they just didn't use a new rarity because that's another rarity symbol they have to explain to people when they open it.
I think I agree that they could probably just put, I don't know, whatever. They could just not put a rarity symbol or something, just because they're so rare that they don't deserve a rarity.
Yeah.
But I think the concept is fantastic, right? This is exactly what like Twinning Blade and stuff were in Crucible. We had just the extended art, foil version of it. That to me is exactly what that collectability should be. And it's similar with I forget what the shield's called. There's the cold shield, I
Oh,
think.
stalagmite, you mean?
Yeah, that's the
Or
one. So Stalagmite being like full art and cold foil. Right?
Mhm.
Is there actually again, because I'm somewhat out of the loop, is there a non-full art version of that?
There is not. It's the only version. It's the legendary version.
I think you're
Yeah,
thinking
see, so
about Earthlord Bounty.
Oh,
There's a regular version, non-foil version, and the cold foil version is the full art or the extended art
yeah,
rather.
yeah, yeah. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where I feel like for those kind of collector's items, right, or the bling, you want to do alt art stuff. You don't want to make the only version of the card something that is hyper collectible and therefore really difficult to get. That's the problem I have with Fables, right? I mean, again, I don't follow it too much, but I know that Viscera is doing pretty well at the moment, right?
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. But in those Viscera decks, are there Arknight shards?
They are
Is that a
not.
card that okay? So in that case, it's fine, right?
Mhm,
I would
There
worry if Viscera was doing well and Arknight shard was actually quite good.
mhm.
That's a huge problem,
there
right?
are a few decks that have Arknight Shard.
I wonder if the few decks that don't have Arknight shard are because they don't have one.
I think those were so I did see somebody posting that the Viscera decks that are running Arcanite Shard are doing overall worse than the ones that are not running Arcanite Shard. So I think it's just it's mostly like a tech choice, I think, which is fine.
Yeah.
That's where you want Fables to be, right? But it's really fine line to straddle.
I think where I want Fables to be is in the bin, basically, as
Sure.
far as a concept goes.
Mhm.
Just again, because all it takes, as an example, all it takes is just for one of them to be just good enough to be a common part of a deck, and then you've got a problem.
Yeah, like a library, right?
Don't say
Or
it.
yeah,
Mm.
the prism, right?
Library sucks.
Yeah, I
Dear.
know. I've heard this multiple times. Okay, so let's just move on. Let's go on to the less exciting part, which is reprint sets with white borders. I know Oliver likes white borders. Kenny, do you like white borders?
I do not. But to clarify, I do think this is a good concept, right? Like, I'm not against the concept. The me not liking white borders is a personal thing. But
I know
yeah.
James White does not like white borders either. So I
Mhm.
think this is interesting to him, where he would willingly put out a product he sees as disgusting / inferior for people to consume. I know some people love him, right? So that maybe he's just throwing him a bone, but I get it's a good concept. I'm skeptical about History Pack's longevity and purpose because it's a set that supposedly has a limited print run in the US, and it's mostly there for stores who did not get their hands on unlimited product that need something to introduce players to the game that they can sell players to get them into the game. I believe that's what James White said the intended purpose was. I'm not sure how well that will happen because I'm not sure stores will willingly want to stock a product that is pretty much like low value.
Mm.
But I suppose there's like Command and Conquer reprints and there's still legendaries in them, so it's not the worst thing. From what I understand, there are 9 legendaries in the set, which means that if their same logic for previous legendary rarities is similar, that means there should be a legendary in every 1.5 boxes, which should be good. We'll see how that actually shakes out. But my biggest problem with the set is that it's 440 cards, and of those,
440.
yeah, so it's twice the size
Oh
of
god.
WPR, which It's understandable because you have to include all the playable like commons and stuff that make sure that they're reprinted. But it makes it diluted so much that if you're gonna buy them as like single packs and stuff, you're not gonna be using much of it. Especially since they're 10 card packs. So like you're gonna be getting like one card of each class and like one or two generics, right? I don't know. It feels like definitely. I'm not a big fan of this product. I'm happy that they're doing it, but I hope they can curate it more to be more like a master set or like a draft set where the commons and stuff you kind of just ignore them and you just focus on like the rare stuff, making sure that that's rare enough to get in people's hands. I don't know.
I feel like in some sense, right? And this is just again me being wild. I almost wish that this set had just gone for something like a Yu-Gi-Oh model. I don't know how familiar you are both with Yu-Gi-Oh.
Somewhat familiar, yeah.
Yeah, but so Yu-Gi-Oh had a similar thing where they've got just a bajillion rarities, right? So I remember when I was playing, there was commons, there were short print commons, there were rares, there were super rares, there were ultra rares, and there were secret rares, right? So just a whole bunch of different things. And a lot of the highly playable cards were in the ultra or secret rare rarity, so they were quite expensive to get. Not bonkers level as cards are nowadays, but at the time, $40 to $50 for a card was still quite a lot. And then what they did later on was they just reprinted like structure decks, etc., which just came with those cards in a more common rarity. I almost wish that things like Command and Conquer and all the legendaries, etc., which are extremely they're necessary for competitive play, right? In the sense that if you want to compete at the highest levels, you need them. You can play a good deck, but if you had the choice to play a legendary or not, you'd play it depending on the deck. And I kind of wish that sets like this were just used as a way to get more of them into rotation. Make them common, make them ugly, put white borders on them, whatever. But if you're trying to get people to, as the article seems to be implying, play the game, that seems like a much better way to allow more people to play. It does make it so that the people who have been holding these cards because they're valuable, their values will crash because the demand from people who just want to play the game will go away.
Yeah, but it'll still retain value. Like you still see the
Yeah, it's not
old.
valueless.
Yeah, it's still you see the old art shock lands that are still like same value, like 30-40 bucks, even though the new ones are like $10. It's the
Mhm.
same. It's the same concept, right? You just slap new art on them, so on and so forth. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's not.
So,
It's
yeah,
I hope the product succeeds in its intended function. I'm skeptical. But that being said, I probably will pick up maybe a box or two just to save for future shapeshifter drafts. It should be pretty fun for that. So after that, they announced the foreign language packs, which are interesting. I'm not sure if they're going to be super desirable. That being said, he did note that the foreign language packs will do, quote, something special that has not yet done for a small subset of cards from the original sets that History Pack 1 draws from. My guess is that it's going to be new art and cold foil. I'm not sure if that will. I'm sure that will make the cards highly desirable, but I'm not sure how successful that would be, especially because of foreign language cards, French, German, Italian, and Spanish are some of the least desirable foreign languages. Usually, from what I've seen in Magic, Russian, Chinese, and Japanese are the most desirable ones.
it's because they look different, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's because they use different alphabets. When you're using a language that uses the same alphabet, it's not as exciting. Whereas
exactly.
Japanese, as you said, Japanese, Korean, and Russian, which are just they look completely foreign, right? And so it's much more exciting.
Yeah, I wonder if the names will include some meme names because I know those ones are usually pretty popular. Like the Spanish Inquisition of Kozilek is usually like super expensive just because of the nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition meme.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so I know German has a couple cards that are expensive just because they have those super long German names like
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
Worm Spiral Machine or something like for Worm
A
Coil
worm
Engine.
coil engine.
Yeah,
I've got to look up what that is. You're taking me back on a nostalgia trip to when I actually played Magic.
so yeah,
Worm Spiral Machine.
yep.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'm happy they're expanding to new languages. I know from what I've seen on Twitter, there is some small amount of demand that's coming from Brazil, and some small demand that's coming from Japan. On the Japanese side, I've seen a couple of avid card game players talk about the game, even though it's not available in Japan. So that does have a bit of hope for international appeal. We'll see how that shakes out in the future, I guess.
Just needs
Okay.
to get some anime versions of each of the heroes.
Oh yeah, that'll
Then
sell like
slap
hotcakes.
Yeah, slap that on the Japanese language product. Boom, you've just sold 100,000 of them.
Yep, absolutely. That's what happened with Magic, right? So
Mhm.
you just need that for FAB, just anime versions of the heroes, and you're good.
That's right, printing cash.
Yep. Okay, so next thing they mention is playing the game is about more than competitive play, which is code word for we need to appeal to the casual side of things. And
Mhm.
so this is something that I've been a pretty big advocate for and pretty big on like trying to do like homebrew stuff for. So I'm glad they're doing it. Of the first thing they're doing is they're publishing more lore guides. I know they had one lore guide way back when, and in the back of that lore guide it said, "Stay tuned for Volume 2, which will release with Arcane Rising." Obviously that never happened. Um,
Crickets.
yeah, obviously that never happened. So I'm happy they're continuing it. And another part of that lore-based initiative is that with the new dual deck product, Classic Battles Reiner versus Dorinthia, they're including a 47-page illustrated lore booklet, which, from what I understand, would just be a small comic.
Yeah, right. Look, power to them for investing in their IP, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I think.
I hope it goes well for them.
Mhm. I'm not super big on Wraith in general because I think it's a more serious Runeterra. I know I mentioned this to you before, Kenny. Um,
Yep. No,
uh,
I can see that.
Mhm. But I do hope it goes well. I do hope they'll flesh out the world a little bit more. And for people who do like that, it'll be great. I'm not sure how much of a return they'll get on it because I know on Magic's side, even though they put their lore stuff front and center, the actual amount of people who are actively engaged in the lore and read all the stories and stuff like that are probably less than 1% of all players. So
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's definitely not a low hanging fruit.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's
That being
yeah.
said, it's not necessarily lore that draws people in, it's art direction. And they've been
Mhm.
doing a pretty stellar job at art direction in general. And so I hope that continues. And I hope that shows in their lore design.
Yeah. I will say that even though I wasn't a big follower of Magic's lore, I knew snippets of it, right? Like bits and pieces, and I can tell you like a little bit about the Weatherlight and who Venser is and all of that stuff. Like it comes up over time. But I will say that like the artwork, seeing recognizable characters in artwork is a pretty important thing. So, in when I looked at the Dorinthia and the Rhinar deck, I saw that like there's a couple new cards and all of that have Dorinthia in the artwork or anything. It's cool.
Yeah, I wish they would invest more space for flavor text because that is
Mhm.
something that Fab is honestly not very good at. And honestly, most card games are not very good at flavor text. Magic's the best,
Mhm.
and I think Magic flavor text is usually just about average. So
Have we talked about flavor text before? I feel like we not maybe not on the podcast, but I feel like we've talked about it somewhere else where we just rated cards flavor text.
we've talked about it because I think we talked about Kamigawa flavor text, which is the best flavor text they've ever done.
That's right. That's right. It was in our chat, yeah, because we were
Yeah,
talking we were talking about how some of the flavor text was trash tier and some of it was great.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah. Okay, gotcha. No, I
yeah.
agree. I agree. More room for flavor text. Flavor text can like really make or break cards sometimes.
Absolutely. Like if you take away flavor text from certain Magic cards, they just become boring, right?
Yeah.
All the
I,
draft chaff, you just need to add flavor text to because that will make people like the card more.
yeah. I have a design example from some board games actually.
Mhm.
So there's this game called Undaunted. I don't know if either of you have played it.
I've heard
But
about it, haven't played it.
yeah, so in Undaunted, it's a World War II, or different wars. I think there's a few different ones now. But basically, you're leading platoons of soldiers and you're shooting your enemy and getting objectives and blah, blah, blah. The gameplay itself doesn't really matter, right? But in the game, you deck build and you get soldiers. But the soldiers all have unique art, very slight variations, almost like palette swaps and different clothing and everything. But they're not just called Soldier Group A, they actually have a name.
Yeah.
That changes so much in the game. I was thinking about it recently with another board game called Dead Reckoning, where you actually customize and build up your crew members, but they're just called crew and captain and etc. They don't have a name. And I just thought if they just added a little bit of flavor, even if they just called it like crewman Sally or something, it would really enhance my investment in the game. So just
Absolutely.
little bits of that throughout games makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And this is actually why a lot of newer co-op games reward you for paying attention to the story and also reward you for getting involved in the story. I'll give Kingdom Death as an example, where you have expendable characters that you customize and everything, and that you follow, but the game's supposed to be super punishing, and death happens all the time. But one of the first things you're doing when you create a new character is that you get a bonus to gameplay if you name your character. So not only are you incentivized to name your character, but you're incentivized to get attached to the character, and that makes it all the more punishing when they die.
It is brutal.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that is a good thing, right? Like
Mhm.
I do enjoy it when games really invite you to get into the flavor. That's what like takes a game from being like an 8 out of 10 game to a 10 out of 10 game.
Exactly. So that brings us to our next topic for the 2.0 article, which is PvE. I'm honestly extremely, extremely skeptical about how good this PvE will be. But the way James White talks about what he wants for the Division sounds like an absolute blast, and I'm ready to play it and possibly be disappointed. So
Ready
he
to be
mentions,
heard again.
yeah, he mentions that he wants the PvE to be the flagship social play product. So that's the same spot that Commander occupies for Magic. That's the same spot for um, for the casual formats of every other game. And it's going to be a PvE Diablo style quest system where you are given a quest, you complete the quest, and you get loot, and you improve your deck based off of that. Almost similar to how Arkham Horror works, where you go through scenarios and you get experience that you can level up your deck with. I imagine it will be similar to that.
It seems very ambitious.
It seems very ambitious because one of my main problems with PvE in FAB right now, or at least the designs I've seen, is that they fall into the scenario where only the raid bosses are meaningfully interesting. And that's because so much of the game is built around the combat that other aspects of like human to human interaction, such as talking, moving, and like making decisions that aren't what attack do I attack them with, are completely absent from the main game. And you have to build that up in your auxiliary systems in order to make that meaningfully interesting. So I'm also skeptical of how they'll do this PvE gameplay because so many cards in FAB require conscious decision making on your opponent's side that I struggle to think of a system that will perfectly encapsulate most, maybe not all, but most cards so that they're playable in the format.
Honestly, I think what they should have done was they should have taken a page out of World of Warcraft TCG's playbook and built raid decks, basically.
Yeah.
So that it's not player versus so that it's not fully cooperative, right? You actually have one player who is playing the raid boss. That way you don't have to design all of these weirdly intricate systems to simulate player decision making. You just
Exactly.
have a player making those decisions, and you can make the boss awesome. Like make it a super powerful enemy, give it unique cards, give it some, even potentially give it some customization options so you don't always know what you're coming up against. Yeah, I think that could be really cool. But I don't know about full co-op experience. I'm not even cautiously optimistic. I'm just like extremely skeptical. I think as you said. I hope they pull it off. I hope it's something great. I don't know if they'll be able to do it. Not with the systems they have in place.
Yep. Exactly. And I've seen people design WoW raid boss like systems for FAB, and obviously there are varying degrees of interesting, right? So that's probably the easiest one. My initial thought was if I was to design a PvE product or like a social casual play product, I would do something in the vein of an arch enemy type system where you sell pre-made decks, which can include constructed staples, and you give people a regular hero and an oversized raid boss version of the hero with extra abilities and extra cool text. And basically you can play a version of that hero which is normal versus this big enemy, or you can play it as that big enemy which has a bunch of extra text and go crazy with this wild deck building that you have with your own cards. That would be
Yeah,
my ideal like product, but
I think that would be really cool. Like I could just imagine as an example, imagine raid boss Rhinar, where it just said you could have basic Rhinar ability, when you discard a card at random that's 6 or more strength, or it could even be 5 or more strength to give you more options.
yeah.
And then just make the ability to say something like intimidated cards only return at the end of the opponent's next turn.
Yeah, or something like beginning of every turn, you draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, not at random. Wow.
Yeah,
Now
crazy,
it's
right?
yeah, yeah. Now it's something more threatening, right? But yeah, something like
Yeah.
that where you have like crazy stuff. I think that'd be fun. But obviously we'll see how this one shakes out. I'm hopeful, but I'll keep a measured hype level for it.
Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Or preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing, right? Yeah. Okay, so lastly, they mentioned reformatting casual play formats. And so that's just basically them formalizing rules for Ultimate Pit Fight. I know certain content creators are doing more Ultimate Pit Fight stuff. I'm not super keen on the format, but if people like it, go crazy.
Different
And
strokes, different folks.
yeah, and finally, my favorite part of the announcement, which was formalizing Commoner rule set. So I've been pretty strong in advocating for Commoner for a while, just because I think it's a great introductory format, and it doesn't include as much instant kill bullshit that you're expected you expect in Blitz. So
Hmm?
happy for the announcement. Hopefully Commoner takes off well. Our store, because I schedule the events, has done Commoner pretty much like once every month for the last like few months, and it's been pretty well received each time. It's easy to make decks for it, easy to get people in, and it's easy just to have some good times. So yeah, hope to see more of that.
Yeah, I think Commoner will be a great format,
Mhm.
but I'm sure that there'll probably be some pretty crazy decks. Like some heroes will come out better just because they can make use of their common set more so than others. But as far as the concept of the format goes, it's great.
Yeah, and this is actually where I hoped that they would do something in the history packs where they could downshift certain rares. So one, they would appear more often, so people could like pick them up easier, and two,
Mhm.
it makes them legal for commoner, so that heroes without as much depth in commoner, say like Prism, or obviously not Prism, but like say like I don't know, Kano or Azalea maybe, they'll get more tools to play with and have a bigger pool to work with, and hopefully can entice more people to play them. But as far as I can tell, there's no downshifting of rarities, so shame.
I wish that would exist too, for other reasons rather than Commoner. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not sure
same
about.
end goal.
I'm not sure how much they can downshift majestic rarities, but I guess since it's a reprint set, you can do whatever you want, not worry about draft. So yeah, it's not a big deal. Okay, and then lastly, we have Elo, which I think only Oliver. Do you care about this stuff?
Not really. I'm just here to play. Remember?
Yeah, but Elo is part of playing, right?
I
You keep on bragging that you steal Elo from people, so
I mean,
clearly you must
I
care
stole
about it.
Elo from Tarek, but that's about it.
Oh wow, that's extremely rude.
I know.
Sorry, Tarek, if you're listening.
Yeah, who actually listens to this?
I
But
really hope that if they do ELO ratings, because this harkens back to the day of DCI and UDE ratings, I just hope that this will then enable them to be used as a pathway. Yeah, I don't love ratings, honestly. The main reason is I distinctly remember trying to qualify for national championships for Magic, which required you to either win a qualifying tournament or alternatively have a high enough elo to play. And the problem with that was I then, because of that, couldn't turn up to Friday Night Magic and play because if I randomly was playing a casual deck and I lost a game, I could potentially not qualify for nationals anymore. So it actually encouraged me to not play,
Yeah. So ELO will only apply to ProQuest and Road to Nationals and above. So
which
at
is
the very
good.
least, for armory events, right, you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I imagine for people who care about their ELO a lot, they might not want to show up to ProQuest, especially if their area is super competitive, because then they might think, okay, well, I'm most likely gonna die to, I don't know, like whoever's in my region who's good. So I want to preserve my ELO, so that doesn't happen. So maybe we'll see reduced turnout. I don't think that'll be too much of a difference. They are weighted differently, so that does help a bit. Where ProQuest and Road to Nationals are weighted super low compared to higher tournaments, so that's a good thing at least.
Yeah, I think at least as you said, they're not doing it on like Friday Night FAB or
Yeah,
anything like that. Right, so that part's good. You can
mhm,
still at least play the game.
yeah. And okay, banned and restricted list stuff. They're no longer having a restricted list and instead having a suspension list where they want to experiment with a fairly liberal suspension model towards the Blitz format to see if it will further enhance, which is code for improve, a positive play experience. Based off of his comments that he made in the Team Covenant cast interview, most likely that's going to mean banning a bunch of cards that make Blitz super fast so that it slows the game down a bit. My guess is that next banned and restricted list, we're going to see stuff like Bloodchi Skeleton go on the suspended list to hopefully make sure that games can last past turn 2, maybe turn 3.
That's very
Duncan
hopeful,
Dream.
wishful thinking, dude.
Yeah, but think about it. If they ban every good card of every hero, the game will slow down.
Why not just play Commoner?
Yeah,
At
yeah.
that point.
No, you should always play Commoner. Commoner is far superior of a format to Blitz.
Yeah,
Everybody's
Blitz.
on the same playing field, and you'll have 10 armor in blocks that you can do as chain and other heroes, and
Mhm.
it's great. It's great. You gotta use equipment like Iron Rot Helm sometimes, and you have
Oh,
to deal with it.
I was gonna say, yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine what's it called? The 6 blocky thing, shadow equipment,
Carrying Husk.
Yeah, Carrion
Iron
Husk.
Husk. That's one. Yeah, I can see that being pretty good when you've only got 20 life. Eh?
Yeah, fortunately, chain is too slow for Blitz right now, so he's not even that good. But yeah, so the last part of the announcement is the most controversial one, which is that in addition to heroes rotating when they hit Living Legend, the weapon that is associated with them will also be rotated with them. So for Viserai, that would be Nebula Blade. For Prism, that would be Luminaris. For Lexi, that'd be Voltaire. For Briar, that'd be Rosetta Thorn, so on and so forth. When they hit Living Legend, they will also have a associated weapon ban. Fortunately, Bravo, star of the show, which is the hero that is most likely to be Living Legend soon, has no associated weapon with it, so it'll just be him that will be banned. So I've heard mixed reception about this, mostly that it feels super arbitrary, especially because Viserai doesn't even use Nebula Blade anymore. But I hope it continues because that way you can make sure that whenever you have a super great weapon, there is a intended expiration date where they will not be legal. That's what that I think that's the argument that Yuki made that I saw, where you want to ensure that weapons rotate so that the game stays fresh. We'll see how it actually shakes out. My guess is that there will be no meaningful weapon bans for the first few years of this, and eventually it'll be forgotten.
I think that if you see, the thing is, and they've stated this multiple times now, that the Living Legend status is not intended to be used as a ban list, right? Like that's not what its intention is. It's just to kind of represent or to reflect on the fact that this hero has done well and now they're in the Hall of Heroes and etc. Now, fine. If that's the intention for it, that's totally okay. But then I suppose they wouldn't be able to then use it and say, well, it's actually used to rotate out weapons as well. That seems a bit strange.
So,
Do you know what I mean?
funny you should mention that because this is actually a question that the Team Covenant guys had for James White on their interview. And James White said, rather paradoxically, that it's a way to keep the format fresh and ban stuff that is too powerful, and also a way to celebrate people who have won with those powerful cards. So,
That is extremely paradoxical because they have clearly said in the past that it is not intended to be a ban list. It
yeah,
is
yeah.
it is functionally, it does function as one, right? Because if
Mm.
something like Bravo Star of the Show wins too often, it
Mhm.
will just through the Living Legend system basically ban itself out of existence. But yeah, it seems a bit, I guess, paradoxical as you use the word to say
So,
that it is actually intended to be a ban list.
yeah, and I'll play devil's advocate here because he did mention that the quote that people mentioned where it's not intended to be used as a ban list was part of their Seeds of Agony ban article,
Mhm.
and he mentioned that article specifically because at the time they didn't want to rely on Living Legend to fix the format. They
Mhm.
were willing to ban stuff to fix the format without relying on Living Legend, and that's what they meant, rather than they didn't want it to just be the only source of bans, basically.
So I think that's totally fine, right? Like I'm all for a ban list.
Yep.
Right? I think ban lists actually keep games really healthy. So part of my concern, in regards to the comment you made before about what Yuki was saying, is that let's take, for instance, let's take Rosetta Thorn, yeah? Which I think is a pretty good weapon. I think
Yeah.
you'd both agree.
Yep.
In the same way, there are other ones like Harmonized Kadachi, etc., which are probably, my understanding is Harmonized Kadachi probably still the best ninja weapon, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So the thing is, let's say Harmonized Kadachi is great with everyone, every ninja, right? And later ninjas then outclass Katsu, and Katsu just never wins any tournaments. Then Harmonized Kadachi is staying around forever. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it doesn't really function there You can't really use it as a ban system, right? I'd be all
Exactly.
for just if there is a weapon that's just too good, just ban it. Whatever,
Yep.
no problem. I think that's totally fine.
Mhm.
I don't know. That's just me. I'm much more liberal with like banning and restricted lists. Whereas if something was like really problematic, I'd be like instantly, well, ban or well, restricted, done. That's why in there up in the other banned and restricted part that we were talking about earlier, they did put these weird little qualifications on there, which I'd rather they just didn't. Like they said, this card will be suspended until X happens. Why not just say this card is suspended and then secretly, when X happens, revise it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I do think that just suspensions and bans, rather than relying on some kind of natural system that you've developed to kind of correct the format, is a much better way to go. And again, I'm not saying that they are intending for that to be the case. Obviously, they have banned and restricted. Oh, sorry, they banned cards previously. But yeah, my point being that just be more liberal with bans. Bans are your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what the next ban and restricted list brings. It's due in 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, 2 weeks or so.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. I have my money on after Sarva goes, they're gonna ban either Ratobones or Bloodchi Skeleton. We'll see if that happens. I know people are sleeping on Viceroy right now, but I hope that LSS can see that as soon as Sarva goes, Viceroy dominates everything.
You messaged them, you emailed them like years ago, trying to
I
buff
emailed them
Runeblade.
1 year ago asking for Runeblade buffs, and they still didn't know that. So yeah, this is before Monarch. Okay, so I had my excuse. Okay, I was like, oh man, Arcane
It's all
Ascendancy
the
is so
Ichin's fault.
cool. Yeah,
Literally every problem with Flesh and Blood. Ichin is also like, you know what
yeah,
you should do? You should make cold foils in first edition.
yeah.
It was
In
all
my
Ichin.
in my defense, I have since messaged them and told them to stop buffing Runeblade. So hopefully they will take the hint.
maybe just chill.
Just chill. Just invest in more casual formats, which they did. Yeah, I got them. Uh, so yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's about it for the article. I have one thing I actually want to mention here, which is something that I thought was cool. For the Pro Tour, they are doing a judge conference on Thursday before the Pro Tour, which is pretty cool. And they're doing a players banquet where everybody who is invited to the Pro Tour gets free food, and there is 1 hour apparently set aside where players can ask James White questions, which I assume will be a very harrowing experience for James White and very cathartic for most players.
I can imagine that being the case.
But I thought it was cool that they did that. I don't know of any other competitive game that has done that, but I assume there has been. Just giving all the players the free dinner that they can just like hang out with other players with. I think that's pretty cool.
I feel like when I went to the Pro Tour in San Diego, I feel like we had like a banquet. We definitely didn't have a ask the designers things, Helio. But I feel like that we definitely we had a banquet.
Yeah. What did they say? What was the email that you got, Oliver, that said that? Like, what was the exact text about the James White thing?
It wasn't exactly James White. It just said developers. Let me find it. On Thursday, after you check in, we will have a banquet to celebrate the inaugural Flesh and Blood Pro Tour. We'll have food and beverages, space for you to hang out with some of the special guests we have for the weekend, as well as an exclusive LSS panel discussion for the folks who are able to make it.
Okay, guys. So it's a panel discussion where they talk at you, not necessarily answer you. So, you can, I guess, players can show up with their little protest signs, and they can ignore them as they wish.
Maybe there might be a Q&A, but yeah, they said that the panel will last an hour, starting at 8 p.m.
Yeah. So for our side, our judge conference finishes up at 5 p.m. that day. So hopefully I can pretend to be a player and sneak into the players banquet and hang out there. I kind of actually want to be a fly on the wall for that. I think that's pretty interesting.
You want me on +1?
Do they allow that?
I
don't think
I'm pretty sure you'll be fine, honestly.
Okay. Well, I don't want to like crash a party by being the person who obviously didn't qualify for the Pro Tour and who obviously doesn't have an invite because I'm clearly not wearing the special lapel or whatever they distribute. But yeah, for our judge conference, one interesting thing is that we have a special judge program announcement from LSS at the end, which I assume will either be judge promos that are specific for us, on top of what we've gotten, or some other structural change to the program where we'll get something out now. Seems pretty cool. Should be pretty fun. I'm pretty excited for the Pro Tour. Despite my complaints, I'm probably the one who's most positive about LSS in general. Amongst people I know, at the least. I don't know, I feel like I'm a fanboy at sometimes, but yeah, pretty excited for this stuff, even though I am just a mediocre player. Okay player.
Just in theme, just like yeah. You should also ask for Alexi.
Yeah, I should do that. I'll see Mashi then, so I can ask him. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's about it. Anything else you guys want to mention?
I think that's good. That's all from me. That's all my complaining out the way. All my indignance, I should say.
What about you, Oliver?
Game's good, I think. Yeah, I think the article is fine.
Thanks, Oliver.
Okay.
I'm contributing, guys.
riveting reviews.
My opinion matters.
All right, I guess we'll see you guys in the next few months. Once I guess we'll do one around when Uprising spoilers happen.
Possibly.
Alrighty. Okay, sounds good. See you guys later.
See you guys.
Bye.